Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I'm actually still in school, so I'm getting my master's.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually, so my background is in design, and then I do a lot of interior design stuff as well. So instead of doing design work, I actually wanted to do consulting.
Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. How's everyone doing? Good. I'm good. So full disclosure, this is my first time giving such a large, I guess, like lecture, kind of cosplaying as a design professor today. So hopefully today I'll be able to impart some knowledge on how to tell your brand story through design. I have a fairly loose process, so hopefully you can get some tips and tricks from it. But a little bit about me, I'm a graphic designer. I've been kind of working in the food space for about 4 to 5 years. Some of my larger clients have included OmSom. They're an Asian American sauce brand, doing some fun new things with branding, which I'll go through in this presentation, and also Made-In Cookware. But yeah, I kind of want to know a little more about y'all as well before I kind of get started. How many of y'all in here are working on a branding project or have plans to? Okay, cool. So the way that this is going to work is I'll go through a little more about who I am along with some work that I've done in the past to give you guys some ideas. Go through the exploration phase of design and then more of the design and production process so you can see what it looks like if you were to work with a designer or if you were to do this yourself. So who am I beyond the little description I just gave y'all? So my name is Michelle. I was born in Taiwan. Taiwan and most of Asia, I feel like the love language is food. It was my mom's sort of like apology language as a kid. Whenever she scolded us a little too much, she would cut fruit or make chicken curry. Every time I go back to Taiwan, food is a huge way that I reconnect with my culture. So I think that's why food has stuck with me so much throughout my design work. And these are all my favorite foods from Taiwan. So as an early adult, I kind of didn't really know what I wanted to do. I got my degree in psychology, didn't want to be a therapist, so I didn't do any internships, but that meant after college, I kind of did retail, traveled for a little bit, worked at a call center where everyone called in was super grumpy, so I was a therapist anyway. And then during that time, I went back to UT to do a boot camp for UX design. If you're not familiar with that, it is a little bit different from graphic and brand design. We work a lot on web products. Towards the end of the program, I realized it wasn't really for me. It was more kind of working on those web products, converting clicks to purchases, stuff like that. So I kind of focused on art and then finally landed a job at a design agency. That agency was doing like oil and gas, very far from the food stuff that I wanted to do. It was a rough experience, hence the tears. But I learned a lot. I did a lot of presentation design, learned a lot of basics about design that I didn't know before, didn't learn through my boot camp. And then during the pandemic, when everything shut down, I got a chance to kind of focus on what I did want to do. So more food space clients, worked with Future Fat as well on some totes 2 years ago. Don't know if y'all have seen that, but it's the one in the middle. Also the AARC, Terry Black's Barbecue. And then during that period, also worked with OmSom. So this is the brand that I was kind of talking about before. A lot of loud, proud, fun branding. This one was super fun because their brand is very different from kind of what you would see for Asian American or even like ethnic brands like 10 years ago. A lot of it was red, black, gold, chop suey fonts. which actually have a very racist history. You might have seen that on like Chinese buffets, like branding for those. But OmSom really kind of changed that. So I'll go into this more like in detail, but colors are very bright, pinks, greens. There is an allusion to kind of the red and gold, but a lot of like fire. OmSom itself means rowdy in Vietnamese, and it's what the founders heard a lot growing up at parties when their parents were scolding them. But they actually built that into their brand story. So hopefully we'll get to talk about how to do that later. And then also during the pandemic, I started Gan Bei Gals with two of my friends. Gabby is one of them. So we host cooking workshops around town. We have an Instagram if you want to follow. It's Gan Bei Gals. And yeah, so kind of hit my stride here. This was for our first event. This was a Lunar New Year hot pot dinner. And it might be a little small, but the menu design, kind of the story that we wanted to tell through this was the interactivity of hot pot. It's a big communal pot, and you grab the ingredients that you want, you kind of throw it in, let it cook. So kind of wanted the menu to reflect that a little bit with the footnotes at the bottom, not really knowing what the illustrations are and kind of having to figure that out. So that was a little fun thing that we did. And then one of our other events that was super fun was a matcha workshop. It was 3 parts really, so taught people how to make matcha bowls, taught people how to make matcha lattes, and we also served some cool noodles. The story behind that handout was kind of based on like a recipe journal. My mom had some old recipe journals just lying around the house, and that's why we use that graph paper with kind of a sketchy style. So this is kind of where you might want to take some notes. Usually for me, the design and branding process is broken up into 2 main parts. The exploration process and then the actual production. So this is actually my favorite part, and I feel like the part that it's okay to spend a lot of time on. This is your time to kind of, I guess, like let all ideas loose. At this point, every idea is a good idea. If you like it, put it on your board. So I do this for everything, not just for a large brand project, but also for smaller event assets like the ones I just showed y'all for Gan Bei Gals. So this is sort of like an inspo board that I threw together from just like Pinterest screenshots to show y'all. Pinterest is actually a very powerful tool. Before I started doing more design stuff, I kind of like respect to all the crafty Pinterest moms, but I didn't kind of have a prejudice against it. But it is super powerful. Their visual algorithm is freaking amazing, and you can actually train it. So I'll kind of tell you all a little more about this board. But for Pinterest, if you haven't been using it, some things that I like to do is I would just add pins to specific boards, and you can split out as many boards as you want. And it doesn't even have to be like a specific thing. If you like the layout or the colors, just add that in, and then Pinterest will kind of read that for you and give you some tips. And then check out those suggestions and add in the pins that you do like, because that's kind of confirming to Pinterest if they're right about what you like, and further training their algorithm, which is super, super helpful. I feel like that cuts out so much time from me like doing research outside of that one tool. So yeah, so some of the stuff that I added on to this board, branding and telling your story through brand doesn't always have to be just logo. I'll get more into this later, but usually when clients ask me for just a logo or they're really hung up on the logo, that is literally the bane of my existence. There's so many other ways to tell your story that are more unique. So let's say that first image, those are little zines in a decommissioned fridge. So if you're a food brand or selling food zines, that's a great idea. And that is also part of branding. That's another touch point that you can build that in. And then you can also consider what things are printed on, your use case, so the little baguette where you're holding like the top of the baguette on the bag. That's a super fun touch. And then the second one with the GBG on it, that's a little offering of every dish we've ever done on a dim sum style card. Kind of modeled off after the like pizza or takeout menus that you would stick on your fridge. So hoping that people will stick it on their fridge and think of us when they want to order food or do an event. And then this, I did not do this, I wish I did because it's freaking amazing. But this designer, whose name is Juri Okita, did this for, I think, an MFA program. And basically, the reason why it's amazing is because it's a fictional restaurant based on wonky vegetables. And you can see that all throughout the branding. The type placement is wonky. There's some custom bits in the type, the I, the O. A lot of photos of the wonky vegetables, just very playful. And I think this is a good case study of how that brand story about wonky vegetables that would have gone to waste can come alive visually. Okay, so these slides are going to be around things to maybe avoid. So one thing that I noticed when people talk to me about branding is that they tend to be very influenced by trends and what's going on, which is totally fine. I think we all are to an extent, but I think it's important to kind of see if that will fit your brand or how it can fit with your brand if a trend is something that you really like. So one of the big trends in the past, not few years, maybe past 10, 20 years, was the flat vector illustration style. We saw that a lot with the tech boom, kind of to make tech brands more approachable, more friendly. So this kind of started popping up like everywhere after Google, Airbnb started using this, and OmSom, my client, actually used this as well. But the way that they used it was to kind of make the brand also more approachable, so it did fit in that sense. These illustrations were done for their hot takes series, so they did a lot of things on Instagram, storytelling around Asian American food stereotypes and debunking those. So very heavy topics, but kind of made more gentle with the illustration. Another big trend, and this one is very close to my heart. This one I love a lot, is just gradients. I think if you've been online since the pandemic, you've probably seen a lot of these. They really had their moment during the pandemic. A lot of mental health, graphic design assets use this. But it's been around for a long time. If you remember word art, there was a lot of gradient there. So trends will come and go. It's important just to see if they'll fit your brand or your use case. So the first one is by a graphic designer that I really admire, Steffi on Instagram. You should check out her stuff. And then the second one is a poster I did from the Artist's Way book. So if anyone is familiar with that, I think it was chapter 2. And then the final one is a Gan Bei Gals asset that we did. It was part of a larger thing, so we had maybe like 6 different dishes from the community. And we wrote recipes for it to share on Instagram stories during lockdown. So it was a way for everyone to connect, and I think the really great thing about gradients, like a good use case for them, is that they're very emotive. So we tried to do that with the Gan Bei Gals assets, kind of like the red for the warmth you feel when you're working with dough, the green bit for just scallion. And then I think a brand that has used gradients very well, actually, and fits their brand story very well, is Kin. So I don't know if y'all have ever had this, but it's I think it's really good. They use a lot of B vitamins to kind of give you that like energy, that euphoric kick. So you can tell all of their different flavors use a different type of gradient to give you an idea of how that flavor is supposed to feel or taste. So the blue one is kind of the calm one, the orange one is the energy spritz, and then the last one, which I've never tried that one, but it's the Kin Bloom, so that gradient shade. And then segueing into competitive research, I do think, so at this point, if you're doing competitive research, it is important to kind of to know what your competitors are doing, but I think you can get really sucked into the trends and maybe influence your visual library in a way that's not helpful to you. So Kin came out in 2018, and I think by this point the other brands were already doing research, so it's possible that gradients had showed up on their mood board already, but these other brands came out in 2020 and 2021. I don't know how this happens, and maybe it's because of Kin, but all like euphoric, natural drinks, like in the beverage space, started using gradients. I don't know, maybe they just thought they had to, but something important to note is that the two brands on the right are actually, their brand stories are actually very different. So Moment, the one on the bottom right, that was created by a South Asian founder, and the idea was based around the benefits of meditation. And the one right on top of it, Hayo, I think is how you say it, that one was created because their family members were hospitalized due to alcohol-related issues, so they were trying to make a buzzy drink that could replace alcohol. But you wouldn't know that from the packaging. Like it might be there in their social assets, on their website, stuff like that. But with just the gradients, you wouldn't know. Okay, so the design production process. For those of y'all that are kind of working on branding projects, how many of y'all are working with a designer? Or don't know yet? Okay, and then the rest of y'all are kind of like still thinking through it yourself? Okay, so this will kind of give you an idea of what it's like to work with a designer, maybe what they're doing after y'all have your first call, stuff like that. Or if you're doing this yourself, these are some tips that hopefully will help you. So the first part in a design like brand package probably will be the logo. This is for OmSom. So usually with a logo, you can expect to have a primary logo. The top one is OmSom's primary logo. That's kind of what you consider a logo type, more type-based. The bottom ones, their secondary logos, are more logo marks. So a lot of logo marks are illustrations, or they can be kind of a little adjustment of the primary logo. In OmSom's case, they used a little O that's like a flame. Kind of, their brand is very fiery, loud, proud, so the flame really makes a lot of sense for them. And then on the packaging, you can kind of see how that logo moves. A lot of brands won't really have more versions of their logo than maybe the primary and the secondary. But for OmSom, part of their brand guideline was always that the logo could move or stretch because that's how things interact with fire when they're cooked. So that's part of their brand story as well. On the packaging, you can tell on the green one, it's kind of like vibrating. That's their loud, proud adjustment of the logo. And then the next part, at least for me, what I work on is usually colors. Some designers will have different ways of doing this, obviously. My favorite way, which I don't know if it's super legit, but I love actually just sampling colors from photographs. So this was a brand project I did for a kids clothing company. And some of the main things in the brand were, the client mentioned like Capri Suns, drinks that you drink when you're a kid, an energetic vibe, but also calm at the same time, and a lot of 90s denim. So pulled some photos that I thought were promising and then sampled them. You can see I usually make little color dots at the bottom of the photos so I can just pick out the ones that I like and just see them outside of the photo. And then I go on to a color workspace. So with colors, you usually want to have a primary color, 2 primary colors, maybe 2 or 3 secondary colors, and then some supporting colors. Some of those supporting colors can be an off-white or an off-black that makes sense for the brand. And so that's kind of what you see there. Large circle for the primary color, kind of testing those, seeing what colors work well together. Something to consider in this phase is definitely to do the color workshopping, because colors next to each other can change. So that's part of color theory and color interaction. You just want to make sure that they work well together. And then you'll see a little more of how they can work together in this sort of like app mock-up that I did. So I like to do this while I'm testing colors, but also while I'm testing typography. I will say typography is not my strongest suit in design. I'm much more like colors and illustration. But some type resources that might be helpful is Typewolf. I used that a lot when I was first starting out. It is very beginner friendly. There's a lot of write-ups on what I guess the fonts look good together. Some of the fonts that they use are purchasable fonts, but they also have on each of their font write-ups what is similar that's free and open source. If you have Adobe fonts, don't sleep on Adobe fonts. They have some really good stuff, and Google fonts as well, so those are totally free. And then some more trendy type foundries, like some of the stuff that I've used sort of in the headers of this deck. Sharp Type, Grilly Type with 2 L's, and Dynamo have been really popular with graphic designers lately. And those all have free trials, so if you're doing like a small business, it probably won't catch you. But if you are doing something a little bigger, I would definitely consider purchasing the ones that you like and have tested out. So yeah, I recommend sort of testing out the fonts together when you're working on this, or maybe having a designer mock them up like this so you can see how things work together. You usually want a display font and a body font at least. So the top left is actually the one that the client and I liked the best, but Basis Grotesque Pro is actually fairly expensive. So we did shift over to a more free option, which is the bigger one that you'll see there. But you can kind of see it's a very slight difference, or I don't know if y'all can see if it's too small. But the top one we liked more just because it was a little rounder, a little more geometric, versus the bottom one was a little more condensed. So kind of that round, full friendliness fit the vibe of the brand a little more. And then something else that you might consider for your brand are illustrations. These are some that I did for completely different projects. Kind of just wanted to show y'all different styles that you can explore for illustration, other than the flat vector styles that have been trending because of tech. So OmSom, of course, it's kind of still in that style, and then Gan Bei Gals, we like to use very like sketchy textural stuff, just because part of our brand story is nostalgia, kind of like thinking back to the time that we were a kid. And the last one is for our zine. This one, in exploring styles, kind of landed on a very like .com-y style where we wanted all the illustrations to really look like they came out of a computer program. So that's kind of the story behind that one. And then some additional assets that you might work on or have a designer work on are stickers, posters, letterheads, template decks can be very useful. And in OmSom's case, we did a sticker sheet a couple years ago, and then last year we also did an apron with Tillet based in Brooklyn. So it was really fun mocking up these colors for them. A little chopstick holder, little bit of brand story there too. Those are actually cooking chopsticks. And then what you can expect from a designer, or maybe how you want to present your brand yourself. A brand deck is super useful if you're going to be working with other creatives later on, maybe if you're going to do a photo shoot, work with an illustrator, video editor, influencer even. It's important to have a brand deck to very quickly show all parts of your brand. So this is for that kids clothing brand. Usually you'll have, it's going to go from left to right and then top to bottom. So you'll have a title, title slides usually what I do, brand values or brand motto, little photo, and then the brand elements, again, the logo, secondary logos, colors, typography, and then if there are anything else, but for this brand, we didn't have anything else, so just a thank you slide. Usually for the brand deck, I'll do it in the actual brand guidelines so that the client can see what that all looks like. Okay, so it is now your turn. The next slide, I'm gonna have some brand, like a brand questionnaire to help you think through what should actually go into your brand story, not just the aesthetics that you like or what's trending out there. And then while you're doing that, if you want, I also brought some books in that have been very helpful for me. So the first one is a color palette book. This is a Japanese one that's like trending a lot with graphic designers, but it's very tiny, but you're welcome to grab and pass around. I'll just leave it here. But there's a lot of interesting color combinations in there that maybe we don't see every day. So if you want some inspo, go ahead and grab that. If you take a picture of it and plug it into some sort of like design program, you can just sample it with the eyedropper tool, and it should tell you what those colors are. The second book that I have is more like an illustration book. So the subtitle of this is really relevant. It's the Custom Illustration Solutions for Brands Today. So yeah, you're welcome to look through this as well. A lot of different illustration styles, a little brand write-up, and then kind of what that illustration looks like on the packaging. So I'll leave that there as well. And the questions that I have, so these are standard questions that I send to any clients. If they haven't done this already, I kind of give them homework. But we have serious questions, kind of mission, purpose, what's at the heart of your story, what sets you apart from competitors, who your target audience is. I think a lot of clients that I've worked with, as you go through the design process, you might start to stray away from this, but it's important to kind of keep that in mind. Who you're trying to talk to is very important in your branding. And then we have fun questions. They seem a little silly, to be honest. How would you describe your brand's personality if they were a person? What would their outfit look like? But it does kind of give you an idea, a personified idea of what your brand, who your brand is. So if you have a notebook, I would recommend jotting these questions down or inserting them in here. And I can also answer any questions y'all have. But yeah, I'll give y'all like 10 minutes to work on this, and I can walk around as well. We have until 12:45, so. Does anyone have any questions now? Yes.
So I also do graphic design, kind of in a very similar space to you, and something I'm running into with client work is a lot of the times they not only want the brand identities like phase one,
Yeah.
and I feel like then there's obviously the product and the existing shelf materials, but I think website is like a huge component that I'm juggling with right now,
Yeah.
where I don't personally have a lot of web experience, and I've been thinking like if a brand needs this as the designer, should I be responsible for then leading a web project and then hiring like a strategist to execute that? But I'm just curious how you manage that within your client space.
I think that depends on your comfortability and what you want to offer. For me, if someone presents something web related, I just tell them no. It's not what I enjoy. I tried doing it, but it's just not like, for me, I love doing the illustration and kind of like the delightful tidbits of a brand. So usually I would pass them off to an actual like web designer. Yeah, I think unless it is something that you want to explore, like if that brand does speak to you and you want to explore how you could kind of flex your design skills on that web thing, that's the only time I would really do it. Or also like how helpful the client is.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you feel like you've, in some instances, maybe, I guess then the clients aren't for you, but have you ever felt like you lose a client because they're kind of looking for someone to come in and do everything? Or do you feel like they're willing to work with you on the initial branding and then they do the work to find the other person?
I feel like I've experienced both situations. I think with freelance clients, more the latter. I think they're like, all right, that's totally fine. And like, if I write out what I'm offering in the brand package and then quote them, they can decide if that's for them or not. And then I'm left doing work that I actually like doing.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of important to me. But I did recently last year have an interview with a client who wanted a sort of like a senior level designer to do everything. And that wasn't really something I was comfortable with, so we just never spoke again. I think it's all of the above, like it's all possible. It kind of just depends. I think for me, after freelancing and taking on like whatever for the first 2 or 3 years, I'm at a place where I kind of know what I want to do and I'll stick to that. That way I can get better at the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
So I think it just depends on how you want to go about that.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm sorry if you clarified this, but when you were working, let's say with OmSom, did you do the logo or were you just on the illustrative side of things? And did you work within a team?
Yeah, good questions. Those are actually questions that I get a lot. So OmSom's branding is really impactful and really cohesive. Like it's definitely one of the, I guess like in terms of like brand storytelling, one of the best brands that I've ever worked with. But no, I did not do the logo. I'm pretty sure a designer named Francesco did that. He's a designer based in New York who's been doing agency work for like 10 years. So he's very accomplished and very good at kind of like building out brands. His style is very fun and colorful. I worked with OmSom as their 3rd designer. Or if you want to include the initial branding, their 4th designer. But I was with them for a long time, so kind of taking their established brand guidelines and building out templates, building out their illustration styles, kind of more what I did. It's a big, I guess like illustration is one of my favorite parts, so building that out a lot more, because I was with them for 2.5 years out of their 3.5 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they just kind of extrapolated what they had.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of taking those colors, the brand guidelines, the logo, and then working them throughout packaging, throughout digital. So a lot of things on their Instagram are things that I worked on, and their email templates. They didn't really have any like templates. Everything was bespoke when I first started. So figuring out what that looked like for like recipe roundups versus sales, stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah. And it was just me to answer that part of your question.
Okay,
Yes. So it was a lot, but they were a fairly organized client, so if anyone else is, I guess, looking into doing more design work, I think the quality of the client matters a lot. They had a marketing team, so they kind of wrote out the briefs and then I worked on production.
Okay.
Yes.
What program did you use when you were developing colors?
Oh, yes, so I can go back to that slide. The slides that had the gray background, these are just Figma screenshots. So I worked in Figma for these just so the client could see my page whenever I sent them the link. My preferred program is probably Illustrator, but Figma's a lot faster, a lot more lean, I guess you want to say, and collaborative.
You said you kind of moved on from the UX. Was there a specific program that you did to get into branding, or was it all self-taught at that point?
To get into the graphic
branding
design?
or graphic design side?
Yeah, so that was all pretty self-taught. I did the program in 2018, ended in September, and then, so the program was broken up into like 2 months of UX stuff and then 1 month of like coding. And I guess I should have read the curriculum a little more. I did not want to do the coding, so I sat in the back of the classroom with Illustrator open and taught myself illustration, was watching tutorials the whole time. I had to have my TA help me with the coding homework. Very bad, like learning, just, yeah. But I started self-teaching towards the end of that program basically, and then also took some art classes here and there, color theory. painting, was doing YouTube actually is a huge resource. You can learn anything on YouTube. You can become a plumber, you can become everything. So that's where I learned a lot of stuff. There's a lot of great artists on YouTube, and also during the pandemic. So I was self-teaching all through 2019. That's also when I was working at that terrible oil and gas design agency. So that was a big year of self-teaching, and then lockdown happened in 2020.
Right.
So a lot of, I guess, creatives took to YouTube to share their knowledge, and I feel like, yeah, just a lot of really great resources on there.
No, that's great, and I'm not butthurt. I am a UX product designer, so but I understand how you feel and what you're saying, and I am interested in exploring more of the visual stuff now that I've kind of like set the foundation for that, and I'm really impressed that Figma was actually you're using that. So and that YouTube and all that's legitimate. So I was a little scared to like use those resources, but it's really helpful to hear that you were actually self-taught.
Yes, yeah. So to clarify, yes, I was self-taught. Figma was one of the first programs that they had us use. Figma and Illustrator in the UX program.
Right.
And in addition to YouTube, I also used a lot of books. So I think the two that I brought are being passed around right now, but a lot of books. I've spent a lot of time in just like the design section at any bookstore, and then Udemy and Skillshare were other learning platforms. But to be honest, I think even those were a little too structured for me. I feel like I learned better with real-time problems. So I would just look up how to do things on the fly, which was really, really stressful for the first 2 years. But it worked. Yes.
Sorry if I missed this. Did you say that, like, I know Figma very well. I'm also in your boat. Same thing.
Gotcha.
Illustrators, don't know anything about, like, and I've tried.
Yeah.
Would you say it's worth learning Illustrator? Like, it sounds, and maybe I totally missed this. Do you use Illustrator?
Yeah.
You do,
Illustrator's my preferred. I think it depends on what you want to do. So if you're still sticking sort of with the UX space, I would not learn Illustrator.
Yeah, it would be for what you're doing.
Okay, yeah. Then yes.
Yes.
I would. Yeah. There's some longer courses like on Udemy where it's like a huge like Illustrator course. So if you have the heart to sit down for that, I think those would be super useful. But I would just kind of like pick an illustration style that you like, and then look up tutorials for that. Of course, you can do layouts and logos on Illustrator, but I think the fastest way to learn all the tools is through actual illustration. Yeah, I think it's worth it 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
I have a question about when to bring a designer onto a project.
Okay.
So I'm actually also a UX designer.
I'm so sorry.
We're everywhere. Yeah, so I that's my job, but I'm also creating a business on the side, and so like I have some skills in visual. I'm like I could take a pass at it and I could try.
Yeah.
But I'm also like, do I outsource this? Like, and at what point do I try and then fail and then have someone come in, or do I just kind of like bring someone in from the beginning? Like, do you have any thoughts on when to bring someone in?
Yes. So I would consider bringing someone in if you're unsure if you want to execute and produce after the brand questionnaire process. So a lot of the like brand, what's at the core of your brand is you. I think that maybe a good designer can help bring those out, kind of guide you like what use cases you're thinking about, having like if there's going to be a physical product involved, some things that you might want to think about, but the actual brand story is all you. So I think as long as you've done the thinking around that, you can do some early exploration as well. I think it's important if you're creating a brand to connect with it visually. So maybe doing some like inspo or mood boards on your own, and then having a designer refine that. I actually ask all of my clients to do this questionnaire and to make their own Pinterest board. So I just get an idea of like where they're at, what their visual library is looking like. I don't know if like you feel like this in the UX space, but I feel like for graphic design I can look at something and then figure out like what their visual library might look like as a whole, just based on that one board. So I would do those two things so that your designer has an idea of your actual brand story and then also what you're thinking visually. But then after that, it's all fair game, I think. Yeah. You could definitely take a pass and then have the designer kind of critique and review and work with you, if that's something you're interested in, for sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes.
Hi, I'm a graphic designer currently, and I work like almost entirely in-house. I'm sort of like trying to branch out into more creativity brand guidelines. I was wondering if you have any advice for people who are just starting to look for freelance clients and that sort of process.
Okay, so honestly, I am not very good at the sales portion of freelance. I'm actually going the opposite direction, so I'm going to be working in-house soon. I've gotten a lot of my clients through just like word of mouth and working in a very niche space, which is the food space, mostly consumer goods. I don't know. I would like to open this question up to anyone, like anyone else that's freelancing. I feel like it can be very different for everyone. I know some designers that are really on it, like they have a whole pipeline. I do not. I've never built one of those. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think maybe networking, or if there's like a niche that you want to work on, like if you strictly want to work on illustrations for an established brand, or if you only want to work with, like in my case, like food brands, that can help, I guess, build up your portfolio a certain way. But yeah, that's all I got on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think niching is something that I've like thought about,
Yeah.
and it's just like a back and forth in my mind, like making the commitment to work on something like across multiple projects.
Yeah.
I should probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. I think the challenge of freelancing is that you're not only designing, you're also project managing, doing lead gen, and all of it, so. Any other questions? Questions on the brand questionnaire? Yes.
I have a question. I'm an like illustrator designer, and I'm trying to steer away from client projects where I'm designing in a different style. I'm trying to do more projects that lean to in the same arena of what I do. Do you have any, like, I don't know if you have like a personal brand. Do you have any suggestions on, I guess, promoting a brand style that is very specific so that others kind of come to you for that style?
Kind of. I think so. I think a lot of designers miss out on this opportunity to brand their own portfolio. I can pull mine up real quick, but I feel like, oh wait, no, I don't have internet. But if you go to Michelle, YKO, I don't know, someone could. If you pull it up, so let me actually pull up, okay, hold on, let me try this thing. If it doesn't work, I can. Okay, it might be connected. So I'm gonna show y'all. So a lot of my brand style aligns closely with the work that I've been doing for Gan Bei Gals, our supper club that we started during the pandemic. And a lot of that involves kind of like clean, condensed fonts lately. And I know I included the gradient thing in the trends section, but I'm a sucker for a good gradient, okay? So it is on my portfolio. This is an older illustration. I had meant to sort of like phase that out using more of the like sketchy brushes that I like. So maybe I'll still do that, or maybe like an animation I looked to childhood a lot for a lot of my inspo, so I wanted to animate something where it was like me holding like a basket, and we play those games where you like use the arrow keys and the food falls on the screen. Okay, favorite game ever. I was gonna build one of those into my portfolio, but it just took too much time. So anyways, that was an idea for kind of branding the portfolio out a little bit more. And then some of the colors on cover are like colors that I like. I do love using color, but still want to stay clean. So there's a lot of that throughout the portfolio. I think the portfolio is a good chance to like tell people what you want to do. So I would probably embed that as much as possible throughout. And then I think in general, I think a lot of clients do expect designers to flex to their style a lot of times. I think to an extent it's a little unavoidable, but I would just stuff everything you want to do like in the portfolio, even like the work itself. So I don't have anything on here that I would never want to do, such as web pages. Yeah, just I have a lot more like illustration work that's closer to what I want to do, kind of like this more sketchy style that was in the presentation. And then this style is very hard, so I don't know, I'm a little out of touch with this. I'd be scared if someone asked me to do this, but it is something I would like to explore more, so it's also on there.
Okay.
Yeah, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, just utilizing the portfolio. I think we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts they want to share?
So when like working or collaborating with like a business or a client, I feel like a lot of times like if I send a questionnaire or I try to figure out like what their style is, I either get 2 responses and they're like really short and they're just like 3 words, or they're like, well, I'm not really sure, I'm kind of like hiring you to do that. So how do you kind of like navigate a situation like that? Is it kind of like you're kind of like don't move forward with the client because maybe your work patterns won't mesh, or is there somewhere?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the first thing is to decide how much you want to coach the client. And you might get a good idea of this based on your initial conversation with them. If you are going to have to coach the client, I would charge them a lot more. So, just right off the bat. If they don't want to do it, I would just gently remind them that they're the only ones that really know their story. Like, you as the designer can help with that and help bring that out visually, but you can't extract the story from them unless you have more conversations with them or they do this brand questionnaire. Something that I forgot to mention for this brand questionnaire is that if your client is like team-based, they can do this with their team. So everyone can write their answers on a sticky note and then put them up on a whiteboard and just see what clusters come out, how everyone's feeling about the brand, so they're not doing it alone. I know a lot of clients can hesitate with homework, either because they don't want to do it or because they're scared that they're going to mess it up. And if it's the second one, I feel like that's a little easier to coach. If they just don't want to do it, I don't know if that would be worth it for you to coach them.